So at the beginning of this year, 5784, not 2024, just to clarify, we launched an ambitious year-long project here at Beth Am, One Book, One Congregation, in which we'd collectively engage in a journey through Abigail Pogrebin's terrific book, My Jewish Year. This was an opportunity for us to do something together, but at our own pace, and to come together as a congregation as we used Abby's personal exploration of Jewish holidays as a mirror to hold up to our own observances and understandings of the holidays. And now, and how we understand or understood our celebration of those holidays, both as a collective Beth Am community and also as individuals. The discussions throughout the year have been rich and varied, from book clubs to conversations with parents, in person and over Zoom. They've evoked sweet personal memories and stories of traditions cherished and some forgotten, maybe remembered in the midst of these conversations, and of the core elements of Jewish tradition, ritual, and practice that really mean the most for and to us. I want to give a special shout out to the One Book, One Congregation team led by Tina Rosenblum and Amy Gerstein, who really just put so much time into creating all of these events and opportunities throughout the year and really making this possible, as well as the donors that contributed to distributing books to the congregation and, again, helping to make this weekend possible. I think it's also, and also a special thank you to all the people who hosted conversations and discussions and led discussions throughout the year. I think it's also been such a terrific project for us as a Reform Jewish community in particular, in which we talk about the idea of informed choice or choice through knowledge as a core principle of Reform Judaism. Abby is a great example of how to walk the walk. In order to really make informed choices, we must first make sure we're informed and really understand the wide range of traditions that exist within Jewish practice. There is incredible value in opening ourselves up to different and varied traditions than the ones that we might have grown up with, so that as each of us decides what practices truly do bring meaning and kedusha, meaning and holiness, into our lives, and admittedly which don't, we can begin to really shape our own Jewish practice. It's such a treat that Abby will be here with us throughout the weekend as our author in residence, and it's my honor to introduce her as she kicks off her weekend with us here tonight. Abigail Pogrebin is the author of the book we've all been reading throughout the year, My Jewish Year, 18 Holidays, One Wondering Jew, which was a finalist for a 2017 National Book Award. Her 2021 series for the foreword, Still Small Voice, featured 18 conversations with clergy about their own faith, which received recognition from the Religion News Association and the American Jewish Press Association. Her upcoming book, coming out next September, is that this September? Okay, this September, is co-authored with Rabbi Dov Linzer of Yeshivat Chovavei Torah, an incredible modern Orthodox yeshiva, and with a foreword by Mayim Bialik, called It Takes Two to Torah. An Orthodox rabbi and Reform journalist discuss and debate their way through the 5 books of Moses. If nothing else, she is good at coming up with pithy titles. Abby moderates her own interview series on the Jewish Broadcasting Service, JBS, and has written for The Atlantic, Tablet, Newsweek, New York Magazine, and The Forward. She's a past president of Central Synagogue in New York City. Abby, it is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the clergy, staff, and board of Beth Am, to welcome you to Congregation Beth Am and to our Bima.
Shabbat Shalom. It's really wonderful to be here. You're a famous congregation in New York. There's so many people I know in various places, and I won't name check them in case I forget them all. But I just have to say that the welcome, in terms of the number of phone calls to prepare for this weekend, is a testament to both your exacting standards and your classic Jewish nudging Particular thank you, Rabbi Heath, who's been less of a nudger, and the wonderful cantor Jamie, who I so enjoyed tonight. Rabbi Sarah was so helpful. But Amy and Tina, and I have to give a special shout out to Tina, who feels like family by now. And in addition to having a wonderful welcome gift at my hotel, which her 6-year-old is apparently responsible for, Tina and I have had so many phone calls, I'm going to miss them when this weekend is over. She also has a beautiful voice, I now have discovered, because she's sitting next to me and I can no longer sing. So if any of you haven't sat next to Tina, it's a good experience. So we are in Parsha Yitro. This is a line I'm sure you've all heard as many times as I have, but it feels particularly pertinent right now. Lo tuchal asehu levadecha. You cannot do it alone. That is Yitro's very famous line to his son-in-law, Moses, in this week's Parsha, where we watch Moses essentially learning leadership the hard way after bringing his people out of Egypt as they start to build a new society after years of slavery. At first, Moses tries to litigate every dispute by himself, but then his father-in-law, in Exodus 18:17, dispenses blunt advice to a leader who's learning on the job. Moses, don't try to shoulder the entire burden without assistance. Quote, the thing you are doing is not right. You will surely wear yourself out, and these people as well. For the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. If I had to encapsulate the ethos of our Jewish tradition and its approach not just to leadership, but to life, it would be Yitro's line to Moses. We cannot do this alone. And more importantly, we don't have to. Since the devastating horrors of October 7th, we've watched this mantra play out in powerful relief. Jews have not for one moment let each other feel alone, even when we felt abandoned by the world. We have held each other up despite obvious political fissures that remain. Am Yisrael Chai, we're one people. Even those who didn't feel so Jewishly connected before October 7th or who had not yet reckoned with or opted for public identity, we have been powerfully and painfully reminded that we are all bound to and reliant upon each other. We cannot do this alone, and we never have. From pogroms to Pittsburgh, we've been each other's oxygen. But Judaism reminds us that it's not just in sickness, but in health, that we're at each other's side. Our tradition tosses us in the same room again and again, insists that we congregate, gather, stand shoulder to shoulder. When I decided to spend an intensive 12 months researching and reporting every single holiday in the Jewish calendar for my book, called, as you know, My Jewish Year, 18 Holidays, One Wandering Jew, affordably priced on Amazon, and a very good Seder gift.
Copies available in the lobby.
I really am so grateful to you all. I mean, you've all done the work. No more, you don't need to buy any more books. But this was my fundamental takeaway above all. Look at how we have never left each other's side. Yes, through this year of holidays, there's plenty of prayer and food, dancing and davening, but the through line of the Hagim is each other. We do not do this Judaism thing solo, and the holidays proved it in flying colors. Look how Shabbat draws us close every Friday evening to welcome the Sabbath bride, no matter what kind of awful week we've had. We bowed together in unison, as we just did, to the Ark and to the East. Look how Rosh Hashanah requires us to hear the shofar blast together as we mark a new year, and how we toss breadcrumbs together for Tashlich, watching our sins float away, side by side. On Yom Kippur, we don't atone alone, but in communal pounding of our chests, we recite the Al-Chetz in the communal we, and we are supposed to prostrate ourselves to the floor in shared humility before God. Look how we sit in a sukkah with family, with guests, commanded to welcome Ushpizin, our ancient ancestors, a symbolic affirmation that we're never without company. On Simchat Torah, we dance exuberantly together with our ancient scroll. Once a year, it's taken out of the sacred ark where it's usually untouchable, and suddenly our arms are around it and each other as we spin in 7 circles. On Hanukkah, we gather around the menorah, lighting candles that physically, literally keep each other company, one more flame and added to the gang each night. On Purim, look at how we are commanded to bring gifts of food to our neighbors. On Passover, we're commanded to invite the stranger to our table. Let all who are hungry come and eat. On Shavuot, marking the receiving of the Torah, we pull an all-nighter together in a marathon hevruta, a reenactment of how we all stood at Sinai, waiting for God's law, ideally with good cheesecake. I noticed it over and over in this journey, the required togetherness. Judaism's nudge towards communal ritual is not about mushy fellowship. Our tradition seems to have something urgent and consistent to say about responsibility, about anti-loneliness, about the proverbial greater family. We cannot do this life alone. When I had the initial idea to embark on a line of extreme sport Judaism, researching every holiday before I observed it, interviewing over 60 clergy and scholars to unpack why a holiday was originally conceived, it did not, newsflash, all come from Sinai, how it connects to Torah or history, what its customs demand, I knew with complete humility that plenty of observant Jews follow the Hagim without thinking or blinking. What would be an unfamiliar expedition for me was business as usual for millions. But since I'd been raised with just a patchwork observance, I wanted to fill in the blanks I had missed, to be able to explain all 6 fasts and Shmini Atzeret, to understand the full landscape as much as one can in an intensive single year. I will admit that I am generally leery of seekers and the bottomless books about self-realization which seem to offer a blueprint for happiness or for meaning. But here was a blueprint, thousands of years old, staring me in the face, and I had never tested it. I'd already been engaged somewhat in Jewish life, but I hadn't lived a full one. The holidays seemed to separate the amateurs from the experts, and though I'd never be expert, I didn't want to be a rookie anymore. When I proposed the idea of writing about this holiday immersion in real time to the then editor of the Forward newspaper, Jane Eisner, she said that she was game under one condition. You have to be honest every step of the way, she told me. I want to know when you're stuck, when you're moved, when you're confused, and when you're inspired. This won't work if you're whitewashing the roadblocks or skipping over your stumbles. We have to hear it all. So that's the approach I took, and for better or worse, you get the whole Megillah in this book, all my ups and downs, all my neuroses and surahs, along with everything that I learned. It's hopefully not a navel-gazing book about me, God forbid, though I'm in it, but it's a journey of one sparsely educated Jew who wanted to learn what I was never taught, who was reaching for meaning in places where I was skeptical that I would find it. And as it turns out, I was moved by the discipline, by the rigor, by the requirements, grateful to so many teachers, annoyed by so many fasts, transformed by the beauty in amazing places. I won't burden you in the time we have with every revelation, but I will give you just a taste of a few. I had never known that we're supposed to reckon with our characters and our flaws before even getting to Yom Kippur. Atonement happens long before atonement, as part of Cheshbon HaNefesh, the accounting of the soul, that begins during the summer month of Elul. I was captivated to learn that an actual goat takes our misdeeds over a cliff on Yom Kippur, the origin of the scapegoat and the literal enactment of offloading our sins. I'd never before understood the erotic dimensions of shaking the lulav and etrog, and suffice it to say, it is not suitable for this family Shabbat service, so I'll save that for another day. I drank single malt scotch as instructed on Simchat Torah, and I let loose on the dance floor, grapevining with strangers, even though I don't love holding sweaty hands. I indulged in the customary scotch tasting again on Purim after completing the fast of Esther, which I don't recommend, by the way. Don't break a fast with scotch and then chase it with Hamantashen. Hanukkah became a much more complex story than the one of my childhood. No more storybook triumph of good Maccabee over bad Antiochus, but a much more fascinating struggle around Jewish difference, an internal civil war, Hellenist versus zealot, secular versus religious, which we still see playing out today. Tu B'Shvat, the birthday of the trees, became about the foods we do not kill and the pitted and unpitted fruits that stand in for when we're soft and when we're stubborn. I am mostly stubborn, as you can probably tell. I loved learning that we get 4 New Years in the Jewish calendar, not just one. Judaism believes in second chances. Passover had the new added layer of confronting our internal Mitzrayim, those narrow places where we're enslaved to harmful patterns in our lives. And I loved learning the tradition in the Sephardic tradition of the scallions and whipping each other during Dayenu. I'll be explaining that on Sunday to the families, but I recommend it. Yom HaShoah took me to a darkened synagogue where for a full grief-filled day, volunteers showed up to read name after name after name from a book provided by Yad Vashem. Not only was this year-long expedition emotional, but it was challenging, hard to keep up with every demand of every holiday without my family doing it with me. But my husband and then teenage kids at the time, Ben and Molly, though incredible cheerleaders, had understandably not signed up for this full ride and were not so excited about fasting 6 times or suddenly becoming Shomer Shabbos. I realized that there are holidays where it is hard to do it alone, that can't be easily introduced for the very first time when your kids aren't kids anymore and when they're set in their ways. Even though I turned off my devices on Shabbat and didn't answer email, Ben and Molly and my husband Dave couldn't easily go off the grid. And my mother kept saying, "Why aren't you answering the phone?" I realized that Shabbat works. Shutting down works when you're not doing it by yourself, when you have family and friends taking that same full pause with you. Lo tuchal asehu levadecha. You cannot do it alone. And I never had to when it came to the learning. Rabbi after rabbi, scholar after scholar said yes when I wrote to ask if I could interview them about Hoshana Rabbah or Tisha B'Av. And after we spoke, they would send me suggestions of prayers, psalms, sermons that might light my way. No question was ever too pushy for them, too chutzpahdik. It was the best snapshot of a private Beit Midrash, house of study. People often ask me what I was left with after this year-long deep dive. I tell them that though it may not have been life-changing, it was decidedly mind-altering. Like when my eye doctor gives me option 1 or 2, when he sets my prescription, I suddenly saw option 2. The Jewish schedule reminded me repeatedly how precarious life is, how impatient our tradition is with complacency, how obligated we are to rescue those with less, how lucky we are to have so much history, so much family, so much Manischewitz. The final task of my book turned out to encapsulate my Jewish year. I gave the complete manuscript for fact-checking to a rabbi whom I consider a walking encyclopedia of Jewish tradition, history, and liturgy, Rabbi Dov Linzer. As Rabbi Heath mentioned, he's president of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, the modern Orthodox seminary in the Bronx. Dov and I met in 2009 at a Jewish conference in Baltimore, and we've stayed in touch ever since. Dov's factual corrections of my book were sometimes so hair-splitting, so frustrating, sometimes playful, sometimes scolding, but we were instantly engaged in a timeless endeavor. Page by page, we parsed language, rabbinic interpretations, rules, and new rulings on rules in a way that not only quickened my brain, but felt, I have to use the word, spiritual. That's how Judaism works for me. The learning sparks the feeling. My exchanges with Dov were expressions not just of education, but of friendship. We were connecting over ancient things. 2 Jews who could not be further apart in terms of observance, lifestyle, and scholarship, finding common ground over nerdy questions such as, who has to tithe on Tu B'Shvat, and when we're searching for chametz before Passover with a candle, feather, and spoon, is that a recent ritual? And what counts as recent? As we neared my final deadline on a Friday afternoon, like an afternoon like today, I was cognizant that Shabbat was approaching and Dove would be going offline at dusk. I emailed him just before. I'm rushing through your edits before sunset to see if there's anything that will trip me up before I lose you. He wrote back, no problem. I'm here. I'm here. That made me smile. It's what Moses said in response to the voice from the burning bush, Hineni, here I am. It's what Abraham said to God on Mount Moriah, here I am. During my Jewish year, I reached for something without knowing exactly what it was. And so many people said, you don't have to take this walk alone. Here I am. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Abby, thank